I want to say welcome. My name is Ann Ayers. I have the privilege and the honor of being the co-lead of the Community Plus Values initiative here on campus. And I also have the privilege and honor of being the Dean of the Colorado Women's College. It's a pretty great thing to be able to advocate on behalf of folks in both of those institutions. So I am really thrilled this morning to bring to you our first community leaders talk. We just thought it would be a fun time because we're not able to be all together on campus and in these bigger venues together, to introduce you to two fabulous new leaders that we have in our midst. And what a privilege it is to have both of you joining us, and how odd it must be to join us and not be able to really see people, right? It's got to be funny. So we have with us.
Odd that Todd has taken my name.
Oh, that too. All right, Todd, you're gonna. You know, Mary, I want to tell you, I was able to get together with Mary the other night for drinks for the first time, and I learned that she has survived a hurricane.
Yes.
She might be able to take over names. I don't know, right?
All things are possible. It was Hurricane Bob. It was a rather traumatizing experience, yes.
Which is always, yeah, so those things are fascinating. All right, so Mary is obviously our Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor. It has been a thrill to just get to know you and work with you just a bit over the last few weeks. And
likewise.
I'm so glad that you're here. Mary comes to us from American University. She and I have in common that we both have a JD.
The best higher degree.
The best higher degree, right? The right kind of D, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so at American, you served as the Dean of Academic Affairs and Senior Vice Provost, and also as an interim Provost. I could read, but I find the resumes in higher education can be really long. And what we really want to do is get to know you as a person. So I'm going to leave it a bit at that.
Great.
Todd, I don't know. You and I are going to have some problems here because I noticed that you have family from Nebraska. I don't know how I feel about that as a Colorado fan. My dog's from Nebraska. But I also want to say that you spent some time at Northwestern, but before that you were at the university that shall not be named by any Georgetown graduate who suffered through the 1982 national basketball game where Georgetown lost to Duke. So, I mean, to North Carolina. Oh wait, you were still at Duke. You were at Duke. I don't like Duke or North Carolina. I'm just gonna say, from a basketball.
Welcome, Todd. We're so glad to have you with us.
That is
not be named.
But Duke and Carolina. That's blasphemy right there.
Oh well, yeah, that's true. All right, okay. So foot in my mouth. But all of the basketball from over there makes me upset as a Georgetown graduate. I'm so glad you're here. Todd and I were supposed to talk earlier this week and we couldn't make it happen. But Todd, you also have just started and lit a bunch of things on fire in the very best possible way and bringing new life into student affairs. So I'm so glad that both of you are here. I also want to introduce you to one of my very favorite people who I've known longer than both of you combined. And that is Dil Khan, who stepped in about a year ago as one of our graduate fellows on the Community Plus Values project. What has been really fun is that in addition to being really dedicated to creating a sense of belonging, which is what Community and Values does, Dil is a graduate student in the School of Media, Journalism, Media, Film, and Journalism Studies. And I think does one of the best jobs of interviewing and creating these conversations of anyone I know. So I'm thrilled to hand it over to her. For those of you who've joined us who need closed captioning, I want to let you know that we do have a captioner and that you can activate that by looking down in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And I also want to say thank you to IT for being here, to Chase McNamee, who is our project lead, and Lenai Butler and Matt Walter, Renee Lilly, who are all in the background helping this happen. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for a few questions. Please, in the meantime, add your questions to the chat, add your questions to the Q&A, and let's get after it.
Thank you, Anne. It's very nice to meet you both, Todd and Mary.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Dale.
I wish we could have met in person, but
yes.
This will do for now. I want to start off by just getting to know the both of you. Since COVID has hit, this is going to be a little bit of a loaded question, but I want to check in and ask how you're both doing. How are you navigating these new experiences? How are you navigating life during COVID at DU? That can be your professional life. You can go into your personal life, but I would love to, if you would share how you're both doing.
Well, thank you. I might jump in first. I'll have to say it's a little curious to move during a pandemic. But that said, folks here at DU have been extraordinarily welcoming and friendly. And one way that I've gotten to know people and actually meet them in person is to go for socially distanced walks. So I just took a walk this morning to start the day, and I got my community and values hot chocolate, which I'm still nursing, and really have found this community to be an extraordinarily warm and welcoming one. And I hope, Todd, that's been your experience as well.
Yeah, Mary and I have had very, I think, similar experiences. The place has been more than friendly, and it is strangely odd to move during multiple pandemics and to try to reset when some of the normal ways that you would connect don't exactly exist, at least not in the typical. So doing a lot of walks and talks. The weather has been fabulous, particularly in the sort of mid to late morning through mid to late afternoon. And if there is an opportunity to meet in person one-on-one, that I have found to be most helpful, and just an opportunity to make those connections in person. And Mary and I even sat together late afternoon, early evening last night outdoors and had that opportunity. So anytime that can happen, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and walking around in Denver during this time of the year, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah, the fall colors. It's kind of crispy in the morning. It's very nice.
Last weekend, I traveled to Crested Butte in order to see the aspen, which are just glorious. I think maybe one more weekend and then they're probably kaput. But the golden color is just extraordinary. It's different here on the East Coast. When fall comes, it's more red than gold. So this is a new phenomenon.
Yeah, no, and I should spend the fall on the East Coast. I feel like I need to do that. I haven't done that yet. So when I get to know you two a little bit more, and I want to learn about you two as a person. So please share with us what makes you you. And you can answer this however you like, your experiences, your passions. Paint us a picture.
Todd, you can start on this one. That may be one clue to who I am.
Yes, the tougher questions start with Todd is a good lead-in. Anne was talking about my Midwestern roots and growing up in Nebraska and having family in Colorado, Nebraska, but throughout the Middle West. And while I grew up predominantly in cities and towns, I had family that were farmers, and so aunts, uncles, grandparents, and working in and around farms, being in rural settings, I think was really instructive for me. There were early understandings of the impact of your work and how it translated into protecting precious resources like the environment and doing something that serves a larger good than just you, and that hard work mattered, and that you could have interests and passions, and those could also be your employment. And to see that all come together at a young age and just know it to be true because it was the experience was sort of a lovely way to grow up and to understand the world around you and the impact that you could make, and whether you choose to do that through farming and feeding others and caretaking land that is so important as a natural resource, or in serving your community in other ways. I also come from a family of educators, so people that have been involved in teaching and learning. And so I think that has probably been most instructive to me in the pursuits that I've had professionally, and probably how I engage, I hope, personally.
So I'll say that my father recently passed away, and at his funeral, I spoke about how when I was 5, he gave me a 45, if anyone on the webinar has seen a 45. He gave me a 45 of Helen Reddy's I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. And that is just emblematic of who my father was. He took enormous pride in my accomplishments and those of my mother, who went back to law school when she was in her 50s. And really with my father's encouragement, I learned a lot more about the history of women in my own family. And so my grandmothers were born in the 1890s. They were very active in the suffrage movement. They were both career women. And so I think when you ask what makes me who I am, I'd have to say it's this encouragement to pursue women's rights and women's history from a very early age, and then the family that I came from.
Thank you for sharing. That's so powerful to hear that people and your environment and your location have shaped you to be the people that you are today. I'm going to do a little bit of a rapid fire. So I'm going to ask 3 questions. Again, this is a rapid fire, so try to answer as quickly as you can. And if you want to expand on your answer, please do.
Are there points associated with our answers?
There aren't, but I can associate points if you want me to.
All right.
I would like to, because I beat Mary at a game yesterday, and I'd like to continue my winning streak. And
Okay.
She knows what I'm talking about.
He's bound to fail.
I guess mentally I'll choose the best answer. Maybe I won't voice it, but if it depends on your answer, I'll decide which one is the better one. Okay, first one. What's on your playlist?
So mine's pretty eclectic. I was just looking. I've got Van Morrison. I've got REM, Elvis Costello. Let's see, Stevie Wonder, and the Rolling Stones. How's that?
That's pretty good.
Todd.
So
I think I won this round.
I know.
When do we move on to the next?
So I too have Rolling Stones, and I have some Van Morrison. Yonder Mountain String Band, which is out of Colorado. 3 Mo Tenors from Detroit. Some Frank Sinatra. And Yusuf, which some people may know as Cat Stevens from the 1970s.
I have to give Todd this one. He said Frank Sinatra. So, okay. Second rapid fire question. What's on your nightstand?
Todd, over to you. I know the answer to this.
You do? Okay, so I told Mary, and this lengthens the answer, but I've decided since I moved here to not bring things, TV, reading material into the nightstand. But a couple of things I'm reading right now, Tales of Two Americas, edited by John Freeman, which are stories or vignettes by several authors or poets about inequality in America and how that has shaped them and their observations of life and really living in love. And it's very well done. The other one that it actually has been on my nightstand, I sort of lied to Mary, is The Best Front Range Hikes. But Mary knows these because she's been out almost every weekend doing them. I am dog-earing the places that I know I would like to go, and it may be spring before I do. But this was a gift as I was leaving Illinois from a colleague. And so I've been looking through and picking out my places of interest.
I see someone in the chat prefers my playlist, so I'm going to go with that. Sorry, Dill.
Oh my.
Sorry, Dill. So on my, you know what's funny, in having moved, I had to, sort of filter my belongings. And so my nightstand is not quite the teetering mass that it used to be back in DC. Right now, I'm reading Ulysses. I'm taking a course on James Joyce. That is not my dog. And so every other Wednesday evening, I'm in a class that's just fabulous about Ulysses, and the faculty member relishes reading the book out loud. The other book I'm reading, because I just joined a book club. So in a pandemic, you try to meet new people. Anyway, I'm in a book club that's online. We just read Hard Times for last Sunday, and now it's The Plague. You might notice a theme. This book club, it's not the most uplifting book club, but it sort of mirrors the times. All right, Matt, did I win that round also?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna let the audience decide from now on who wins. But Todd, I really like that book. I think it was called Front Range. I am probably gonna have to grab a copy for myself because I've lived here for so long, and I typically just go to Boulder to hike. So I'm trying to find other places, other hiking trails. Um, I want to move on. Oh, we have one more question. Sorry. One more rapid fire question, but I don't really want to call it rapid fire because I want to give you the space to expand your answers. But what have you missed most during COVID that you look forward to having once we don't have so many restrictions? And it doesn't have to be limited to like one answer. I mean, there's a lot that we miss, so you can share more than one.
I'd say travel. And so Todd may read about hikes, but no, I'm just teasing you, Todd. So last summer I took my sons to hike Kilimanjaro, which was very exciting. And this past summer we were to have gone to Morocco. One of my sons is studying Arabic, and we wanted to go to Morocco so that he could practice his Arabic. But that has been put on hold. So I miss the travel the most, is what I'd say.
I could certainly echo travel, and had a trip planned for late spring that obviously did not happen. So that comes to mind, but probably just day to day, I miss the opportunity for live performance, live music, attending plays, musicals, things of that sort that were part of my routine in Evanston, Chicago. So I miss that a great deal.
Definitely. I have a follow-up question, and I'm just curious. I want to ask, what are your favorite travel destinations?
For me, it would be London. It's a place that I've gone back to time and again. I did study abroad there for a year in college, and just love it. And was there about a year ago, and it just it's such a great city for walking. You just walk out your door and wander for hours.
I enjoy all kinds of places. It's tough for me to say. I did have a chance for the first time to go to Spain in the last couple of years, and had not been, and found it to be a wonderful place to walk, to travel across the country, and to sort of be immersed in art and culture and sport and people. So that was a recent place that I had enjoyed greatly.
Yeah, those two destinations sound wonderful. My friend actually moved to Paris a week ago. He was due to move back in March for work, but then it was pushed back, and so now he's there, and he's posting pictures on Instagram, and I'm like, wow, what I would do to trade places with him. So thank you for sharing your answers to the rapid fire questions. I feel like that gives us an insight of who you two are. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about leadership. So you both led and been on teams. Can you think back to a leader and or a team member who you hold in particularly high regard, and what made that person's work so powerful?
Interesting question. I would say that there are a number of people who I've worked with or I've worked for, and they're in my mind when I'm faced with a particularly challenging situation or I need to make a difficult judgment call. I will think to myself, what would so-and-so do? And so I don't know if there's one individual in particular. It's sort of a number of different individuals. And I spoke of my parents earlier. I would have to say, first and foremost, my parents.
I think, and I appreciate Mary's response, because I think mine probably dovetails nicely. It's hard to think about a person, but more about characteristics or things that I've admired and taken with me. My two grandmothers each worked and worked in professions, and I think taught me an awful lot about engaging with people and how you do that in a way that brings more people under the tent, if you will, and create space for that. And I've always appreciated that. I had a supervisor when I was quite young professionally, who I think helped connect dots and really saw their role as leader as taking sort of multiple perspectives and finding the important intersections among them that allowed people to see themselves in the work across the team, regardless of what level or position they held. So I appreciated that. And I think the other thing I would say is I also worked for somebody relatively early on who I don't think exhibited ethical or good leadership. And I learned an awful lot about what not to do. And that sticks with me. Sometimes that sticks with you more and it's not always pleasant, but I knew from an early stage what I wouldn't do if I were in a similar situation or had the opportunity to lead in space.
Yeah, I really like that. We learn from the good and the bad. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you both started within the last 6 months at DU, correct?
Mary's a long-termer. Mary's a long-termer. She's been here multiple months.
My 3rd month anniversary. I started July 15th, so 3 months today.
Well, see, she is a long-termer. I've been here basically a month and maybe a week. So
6 weeks.
I look to Mary for context all the time.
Well, as newcomers and as leaders, can you share what you're most enjoying about leading at DU?
For me, it's getting to know the community, getting to know the people. And so again, these walking and talking meetings, I have another one coming up this afternoon. It's really, for me, just the richest part of my day is getting to meet new people. And then I'd say additionally, solving problems collaboratively. So working with my team in the Provost office, working with the deans across campus, working with the faculty more broadly. Those are the folks with whom I work most closely, and enjoy that collaborative problem solving, which is quite a creative endeavor, which is why I enjoy it.
Might I note that Mary talks about these walking meetings, and that yesterday we were to have a meeting and I said, wouldn't it be nice if we walked and talked? And she said, no, I can't do that with you. So I
had another walking and talking.
Very selective about these walks.
That's true.
So I just want to be clear that she's learning in these, but apparently I don't fit into that portfolio there.
Draw your own conclusions.
I know. I would say, you know, there are really two things that stand out for me about being at DU at this time. And one is just that spirit that pervades, that's boundless ambition. I think it's a place that always sees itself moving in a direction, driving forward. And, you know, maybe that's part of that mission to support and enhance the public good. But there's a boundless ambition that you see academically, you see it across the co-curriculum, you see it certainly in all of the experiential ways that DU is engaged and involved from students, and certainly by faculty and staff support and involvement. And I think maybe the other piece that I see is that, and it's really unique to right now, is that we're engaged in multiple pandemics. And so the opportunity to have to dive right in and work with people very collaboratively, as Mary offered, to solve problems and big problems, but of the moment. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting through that day to the next day because it's so rapidly shifting and we're all dealing with it in real time. So it's a unique time to come into a new place. You asked early on, what was it like to move? Well, kind of a little different and odd, but it has also provided an opportunity to really quickly engage in problem solving work with colleagues across the university. And that has been, I think, really a wonderful way to get to know people very quickly and to work on things that matter and of substance.
Definitely. I want to remind the audience, before I turn it over to Anne in a couple of minutes here, to please post any questions that you have. I've actually got a couple of questions on my end that I would love to ask both of you. So you've sort of talked about this. You touched on this a little bit during your answers today, but I'm interested to hear, what does community building look like in a virtual world? So you both talked about walking. It looks like Mary is very exclusive with the people that she walks with.
Thank you. Thank you, Gil. I appreciate that. I'd like to note it in the record. Thank you.
This is recorded, so it's on the record. Mary is very exclusive with who she chooses to walk with. Hopefully, I'm on that list one day. But if you could just share a little bit more, you can add to that. But it looks like taking walks with folks on campus. That's one way to build community. But what does it look like to both of you in this virtual world?
Right. I'll say the reason why I enjoy the walks, in addition to getting out and having fresh air, is that I think it's really a fabulous opportunity to get to know people. As you're walking and talking, I think it really allows for reflective activity. I remember growing up as a kid, my mother and I would go on car rides, and then we'd, park in our driveway. And that's when we had some of the best conversations. We were side by side. I think likewise with the walking and talking, just to learn about people, learn what's on their minds. How do you build community? I think it's through those conversations and those interpersonal, the one-on-one relationships. And I'd say, I think what the one-on-one relationships are helping to do is to sort of build upon values and principles, or to identify values and principles that we share. So the commitment to the public good that I've spoken of earlier and Todd has spoken of is something that resonates very strongly with community members here at DU. And I think there are other values like that. The outdoors and, being physically active with hiking and biking and what have you also seems to be one of those things that's widely shared. So those would be some ideas that I have about building community.
Again, it's hard to always follow Mary because she gives such good answers. One of the reasons that I think, Mary has been good about forging the kinds of connections and during these walks is she asks really good questions. And I think being an active listener, listening with your whole body is something that we do when we're in person. You can tell, you can feel that. In the two-dimensional, it's rather difficult. But one of the things that we can do is what we're doing right now, which is asking people questions that are important or that matter, and giving people opportunities to engage that way. I try to start meetings whenever possible with a brief check-in question that may or may not have anything to do with what the topic or agenda of the meeting is. And that allows you, particularly when you're new to a place and to people, and you may have only seen them in the virtual, to know a little bit more about them. And so I've appreciated that. I think we're seeing, as we have with all technologies, how it can be expanded in ways that we never would have guessed and maybe we needed to. And yet there are points of diminishing return. And so figuring out how we can take some pronged approaches to creating community, whether it's through the walks and talks, whether it's through, I have found just getting on the phone with people feels strangely normal. I mean, it's, back in the day, it's very old fashioned, but it's like, can we just talk instead of Zooming, because people feel like I've got to look at myself, I've got to look at something, we're going to share a screen. And is that always the necessary way? So are there other ways that we can engage that still involve technology, or maybe just are taking advantage of the good weather, the climate we have, and the opportunity to be outdoors and be in space where we can be together?
Yeah, I also find myself, Todd, FaceTiming my friends way more often than I used to. And talking to them on the phone. That's not something my generation does, at least. So it's odd that suddenly we're all talking on the phone, but that's what we need, right? We need that connection, whatever that looks like for us.
Yeah.
I want to further this conversation about community. And so regarding the DU community, what are you most hopeful for and where do you see opportunities for us to grow together?
I'm going to start again, Todd, if you don't mind. I think what I'm most helpful for is our community building the muscle to have conversations across difference that are meaningfully engaging and explorative. I don't expect that folks are going to come to a shared understanding or come to consensus on a matter. What matters more to me is really the process, that there be a mutuality of respect and of interest in learning about the other's point of view. It's not something we're seeing broadly reflected in our culture these days. And I am optimistic, always have been. And I do think it's the central value that higher ed and the central contribution that higher ed has to offer to society is to model how those conversations across difference, exploring different point of views, can be had most, productively.
Well, once again, I could say, ditto or retweet, I think the younger crowd would say, Mary. I agree with that. So if I could expand on that, I would say I too am hopeful. I'm looking forward to coming out of what has been a very difficult time for everybody personally. Certainly as a community, higher education has been impacted by the way in which we typically or traditionally engaged in learning process, and the acquisition and dissemination of knowledge has been affected quite a bit by how we've had to organize and operate these last many months. So I'm looking forward to that and building the relationships and the muscle that Mary discusses to do work together. I tend to think of learning outside of just conventional classroom and lab spaces, although those are critically important and drive so much of the scholarship, but the places in where people practically apply those lessons and engage with each other in community and in leadership, either residentially, experientially, co-curricularly, and how we think about that in a way that doesn't feel so bifurcated. And my work thus far just here, and again, so much of it has been managing in COVID, but has been thinking collaboratively with Mary about how do we think about what we're doing in the learning environment more seamlessly, so that students and ourselves, in the way that we're structured, aren't quite so compartmentalized. And if it also gives us an opportunity to think about how we're supporting social change in the public good. And so many social movements really incubated on college campuses, and we can go back in time and see that. And we're at yet another moment in time and opportunity to do that. So how are we fostering that? How are we equipping our students and our community through the work that we're doing, faculty, staff, and beyond, to be engaged in that, not only while here, but out in the world around us? And so that's exciting work. And I do think we're somewhat uniquely positioned in higher ed to do that, and maybe even more so at the University of Denver.
Definitely. As I have one more question before I hand it over to Anne. As leaders, as newcomers, as people, we face a lot of pressure to do the right thing. And what's difficult is that we're navigating COVID, we're navigating life during this crisis. So what causes you to lose sleep, and how do you cope with it when the pressure of everything gets to you, especially as leaders and newcomers on top of all the other roles that you play?
Well, what causes me to lose sleep is making the right decision. So there are some big decisions that I've needed to make since coming to DU, and it's really mulling over what is the right decision that probably is most on my mind. and back to the walking, it is an incredibly effective way of processing thoughts and emotions, but it's an incredibly effective way to come to decisions that are thoughtful and mindful and reflective.
This is a great question. The health and well-being of students particularly, but also of the staff and student affairs and inclusive excellence in their health and wellness in the work that they do and the environments that we create for that work to happen, and certainly for our students in supporting their learning and living and playing, and how do we create conditions and environments for all of that. And I'm keenly aware of particularly mental health, and perhaps even if it could have even ratcheted up more, but in this time, because of the toll that the multiple pandemics that we're experiencing and that our most vulnerable and marginalized populations in particular are overwhelmingly experiencing, are things that I think about each and every day. I go to bed thinking about it. I probably don't get up for more than 5 minutes before something comes to mind about what we're doing, what we need to do on that front.
Yeah. I'm going to hand it over to Anne now, but I just want to thank you two for having this conversation with me. I learned so much about you both, and hopefully we can walk soon.
Jill, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to the walk.
I do too. Jill,
and it's always beautiful here. You know, from the East Coast, that is not something I'm accustomed to. So it's a gift every day. So I look forward to our walk.
Yes.
See, Jill, you've already gotten the invitation. I'll try to worm my way in
on our walk.
But I will see if I can get one. You and I can for sure. And you can go ahead and put in the chat if you want the tally of who won, right? Because there was a score being
clear. It's clear.
It is clear, and I'm so glad to have the honor bestowed upon me as winner of the lightning round.
You know, Jeremy just sent me a private message. He'd like to turn this into a race. You know,
well, clearly I'm going to win. I think we've already demonstrated that.
Oh shoot, Jeremy is on this. Oh
no, I'm just kidding. He didn't.
Okay,
but were he here? I guarantee you, having known him just a little longer than both of you, that probably would have come up, because you know we've got a chancellor with how many Iron Men tattoos on the back of his calf, and he's and the Rhodes Scholars. You know, he gets
indeed. The first time he is on it. Yes. The first time I spoke with Jeremy,
he's here.
He's right there. He told me of a book called Spark, which is all about coming to Dill's question, coming to problem solving, coming to new understandings through exercise. I mean, there's a very clear connection between exercising and coming to clarity of thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
running gives me that.
It used to be on my nightstand. It's on my nightstand back in DC.
Not doing a whole lot of good.
Right. But I read it already, and I've retained the knowledge.
Way to show your boss that you are reading what he's giving you, Mary.
Totally.
Very well played.
I thought so.
Yes.
All right. So we've had a couple of questions that have come in around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I want to move into those. Yes, points, Mary, from Jeremy, if you're looking in the chat. Yes, I know. All right, so we're going to switch to this. This has come up, and one of the people who posted this question is Nancy Jones, and if we were all together, she would be someone I would really want to introduce you to. She graduated from the Colorado Women's College and has been at DU for, Nancy, I don't know, you can post it in there, but I want to say more than 20 years. And has worked in university libraries and as an archivist, and pretty extraordinary. And she's really sort of asking, you know, this is a time of racial tension, and also just even broader from another participant. What do you see your roles in terms of being in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And also, what are your experiences in those areas?
Well,
Mary, you talk a lot about this because
right. That's an enormous question and a very, very important question. I guess one thought that comes to mind is that I think as leaders of the campus community, we must be role models. In terms of what I was talking about before, with dialogue across difference and curiosity about others. So curiosity about the different experiences, the different backgrounds, the different perspectives that folks bring to bear. So I think I would elevate that quite high in terms of our roles as leaders on campus. I began when Dill asked me, what is the most, revealing part of my background or my upbringing, and I spoke of my father and Helen Reddy. I am passionate about women's rights issues. I'm passionate about civil rights issues more broadly. I began my career as a lawyer in Montgomery, Alabama, doing civil rights work, and then came to DC, where I continued litigating cases in the federal courts of appeals related to women's rights, related to issues of race, and also disability rights. And it's work that I feel passionately about. Then I went into teaching on those same issues. So I would just offer that, I'm immensely committed to these issues, and I see my work here as a work in progress in terms of learning myself throughout life. And I welcome that engagement and that learning and that reflection, and would love to work with others in that endeavor.
It is, great question. We could talk probably for hours on the topic. And, for me, working in student affairs and inclusive excellence at DU, but just student affairs professionally, I think a big part of what drove me into the field and wanting to work in higher ed is because it is a place that elevates this work, and particularly social justice. When I talk about the kind of work that we do in student affairs and the way that it has, in some cases, incubated in our space and has begun to then connect into other spheres at the university, for me, centering students, and particularly our students from marginalized backgrounds, when we're thinking about policies, when we're thinking about programming and our protocols or practices, if you can design those and rethink those and construct them in ways that you're centering those that are perhaps have been or continue to be on the margins, if you do that well, you have created community or conditions for community to allow everyone to thrive. And that's a big part of being in a role where you have a chance to support staff in doing their work, that you can be responsible for resource distribution or allocation, and importantly, policies. In thinking about how do you develop policies from an inclusive lens, how do you support some of the systemic things that need to be deconstructed or at least looked at so that they can come back in a way that are much more affirming and inclusive in the way that they support everybody. And I think we tend to think about policy formation and even our protocols of what does it serve for the majority of people, and we center that. And if we could flip that, and I think that's a big part of what you see, certainly in student affairs and inclusive excellence here, it creates conditions for everybody to do well and everybody to thrive. So for me, it's part of why I do the work I do. It's a lot of learning and unlearning myself, but then in community and being in a space that supports that and lifts that up every day, and making sure that that's available to everybody to do as well in their work and in their learning is something that brings me some sense of joy and pride in doing the kind of work that I get to do every day.
Yeah. In the brief time that I've got to know you, and it comes through in these answers, what I've appreciated is a focus on the systems and the structures, and not just sort of the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's so important, and I think that'll give all of this work legs. And then it's also really I've noted both in your interviews way back when and now that you come at this with a humility and a growth mindset, and you're both reading and learning and unlearning, as you just said, Todd. So we have another question that came in from Doug, and I don't know his last name, but I think it's a great question to put on the heels of this. And it says, as you on board with us here at DU, how have you learned about and confronted, and I would say maybe, or think about confronting, our institutional past, including the respective roles of our founding trustees in the anti-Indigenous agitation proceeding? And I'll pop that back up, it just popped up on my screen. And obviously we're talking about the Sand Creek Massacre of 1864, and then the ensuing Evans Report, which I'm assuming you're both pretty familiar with. The folks that dug names here are William Byers, who was founder of Rocky Mountain News, John Evans, who we all know was the superintendent of Indian Affairs, concurrently governor and founder, and John Chivington, who was an on-scene commander. So give us some reflections on that. And thank you for that question.
Do you want to start here? Because it's something we've talked about, but with your Northwestern background, and then here, it might be of interest, and then I'll follow.
Sure. Interesting connection to my prior institution and to here. I came from Evanston, Illinois, namesake being John Evans, and John Evans being one of the founders also of Northwestern. And so that institution, as well as the University of Denver, doing their own research and work. And while I was at Northwestern, had a similar John Evans report that came to light as a community, where we brought scholarship, we brought community members, Native peoples, students, and historians together to really look at what happened and transpired and how that became a building block of the institution, and offered an opportunity for not just reflection, but a bit of a reckoning, where there hadn't been a full understanding, and certainly not one more publicly placed and stated, about our history and what it meant to be at an institution that was built upon such tragedy, and the taking of land from Native peoples, and how that contributed to the growth of, in this case, both institutions. So I think having a deeper understanding of our history, and trying to use that as a way to not only promote some transparency, but some opportunity to learn and to heal, and what can we use from that to take us forward in some of the work that Mary has talked about, that perhaps, and I've said, I think we might be uniquely positioned to do in higher ed, but maybe when I said even more so at DU, it's because of this understanding and being much more forthright with it, and using it as a vehicle to have the content of some of that conversation, because it's already there. And in dialogue, I think, as we understand our past and how that contributes to who we are, it certainly says something about where we might go. And we have to better understand that and bring it forward. We have the John Evans Chapel. They have the Evans Chapel right in the middle of campus. And so that creates a unique learning opportunity for us too, just in it as a structure and what it symbolizes. So.
And I'll build on that by saying I've been reading a lot of histories of DU. I'm an armchair historian, and not all of these histories acknowledge the Sand Creek Massacre, really come to terms with Evans and his background. And so to Todd's point, I think we need to be ever mindful. Along those lines, I would, as the Chief Academic Officer, love to do more around Native American studies here on campus. We have a critical race and ethnic studies minor. I'd like to do more there. And as Anne knows, because you're on email very early this morning, recently it was shared with me the 2014 studies that relate to the status of women at DU, as well as the status of people of color. They were done simultaneously, and the findings of each of these studies were very much in parallel. as to how people do or don't feel valued on campus. And I would like to lift that work back up. It was a very thoughtful series of studies done, just recently with extensive surveying and focus groups and what have you. I'd love to lift that work back up and move it forward. So I very much appreciate the question. And I appreciate being in an environment that is that reflective, that learns from our history and moves forward.
Right. And I obviously can't say much about it, but I have the, I get to be on the Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Search, and what I would like to say to everyone is that committee is phenomenal, and I am learning so much from the folks on the committee and the kinds of questions that we're thinking about asking candidates. And I can tell you that the first big group of candidates that we saw, a lot of those people took us to even better places. So I think that DU is really poised with your new leadership and this new person, whoever it turns out to be who comes, to really go at this in a different way. Todd, somebody said in the chat that they like the word flipped that you used. I agree. I think that's kind of a neat way to think about it. Okay, so we have just about 5 or 6 more minutes. I want to go, someone has asked, what's a big failure that you had and how did you overcome that? I thought that would be a good one.
Well, Todd, you can start with this one.
I so appreciate the pong right back to me on failure, because there would just be so many from which to choose, of course. For me, I think a failure, and I referenced it a little bit earlier, saying that I learned a lot from somebody who didn't lead with intent and ethic and with an ethic of care. And I think a failure early on was to assume that everyone that had a position of power or a leader, as it was framed earlier, and not just positionally, but in ways that we might acknowledge or affirm somebody's status, that everything that they brought was had truth to it or had strong merit and wasn't a good critical questioner. And early on, and I would say really it took me through my 20s and having some significant professional experiences, and without getting into detail about failures that occurred during that time, to suggest that myself not asking the sort of critical question or being able to sort of meta think, to say, I have these thoughts, now why is it that I have them and what does it mean? And I would act without fully realizing or being able even to rationalize that action. And so that led to some missteps. And then I took a step back, probably more personally than even professionally, in ways that I had to really come to grips with and start to reflect. So being sort of a critical thinker and inquiring about why things are, and having my own thoughts about that and being able to let that drive what I did, is something that I had to come to and learn after probably some hard knocks or some lessons, as my grandmother would say. You had a lesson there, so.
Well, I was going to say, if Jeremy's still on the line, I'm a failure at running. I've taken up running twice, and I just, I need someone to chase me in order to run. So I've been a total failure at running. I'm a big swimmer, so I could be in a sub-iron person competition.
So Mary, if I can't walk with you, could I chase you? Would that be?
That might work,
okay.
Yes. But, oh gosh, he's still on it. Okay.
I'm not even going to read what Jeremy is writing here.
He just suggested a team triathlon.
All right, I'll do the swimming. I'm a good swimmer.
I'm going to be the chaser.
Yeah, right. So for those of you, more seriously, those of you who are parents who are listening, I'd say parenthood is the thing that I think it's my most important responsibility. I wouldn't say I'm a failure because I have 2 wonderful sons, but it's very much a work in progress. So I think that's where, my efforts have been most reflective.
I look forward to Mary. I really did say this the other night. I have twin boys who are 10 and she's got two who are 17, and I think that
18. I got them out of the nest.
To get them through the next few years, I might need a few more coaching sessions because it's something else. All right, we have literally 2 minutes left. We have some questions. I'm going to put them back into that rapid fire form really fast, and then we're going to.
Oh my!
So, I'm going to tell you what.
Are you ready, Todd?
Keep score, Anne. Keep score.
I'm totally going to keep score. I'm going to tell you what all 3 of them are right in a row, and then you get 20 seconds to pause and then give them to us. Do you have pets? If so, what are their names and what are their breeds? And let's throw in ages. Another one is, what's your favorite?
I have to remember this.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite musical? And then what's your favorite motivational quotation? So let's start with pets.
All right, that's easy. So I'm the mother of twin boys and the mother of twin cats. They came with names, all right? So I did not choose these. Peanut and Pumpkin. Pumpkin is a gray calico. Peanut is an orange tabby. And every morning when I wake up, I have to think to myself, Pumpkin is not the orange tabby. So it's keeping me from dementia, I think is what it comes down to. I'm not a fan of musicals, I have to say. And what was the third?
Favorite motivational quotation. Do you want to pause and let Todd answer the first
Sure.
one? Okay.
I have a dog, Murphy. He is a rescue. The vet thinks it's a doodle husky mix, so very interesting. He was who you heard. I apologize for that, but he wanted to join in. Motivational quote. My grandmother used to say, we must learn something every day we can use tomorrow. I keep that on a little card or a little thing on my desk, and that drives me a lot. And I actually do like musicals. As I said earlier, I miss sort of live performance. I would not even dare pick a favorite because it really kind of depends on the mood and the moment and the production and all of that. So Billy Elliot, I saw produced in a way that I found fantastic. So I could offer that just because of the staging of it.
Right. Mary?
I'm still not a musical fan. Sorry, I haven't transformed in the last 20 seconds. But let's see. I might channel my inner Sheryl Sandberg. I do think for women, the idea of leaning in is significant. And I did talk about that with my law students and spoke about that with my students more broadly. I think women students today can sometimes self-select out of the most competitive professions or career avenues because they're thinking about childbearing or what have you. At any rate, I do think the lean in message can be important in sort of, stiffening our backbones in different situations.
Yeah. All right, well, we are at the end of our hour. I want to say that the 2 things, I'm going to put these on motivational quotes on my desk, but hearing really about active listening, Todd, means a lot to, I don't know, that just struck, I need to be doing that. And that's really helpful. And I like how you process through it. And Mary, I think curiosity, when you talk about the importance of that. So thank you for inspiring me today. And thank you for your time. I know you're busy. We're all so busy. So I really, really appreciate it on behalf of the community. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Dill. You've just set such a lovely environment for us to have this conversation. And I'm really not that competitive. I'm just giving Todd a hard time.
Well,
Truth be told.
I think this has a to be continued element
Sure.
to it. I think that, maybe next quarter we'll bring you back. We'll have some more sports to talk
I'll
about.
try to listen to musicals.
We'll try.
Yes.
On the 22nd, we have an event coming up. It's a module around growth mindset and resilience. So check out the C+V website for that. And then on the 29th, we're going to have right before the election, we're going to have a conversation about political identity and have some experts. We have so many experts on this campus, but some folks who can lead us through that conversation with power and grace. So those are our 2 forthcoming things that we have. We're so happy that people have been able to join us for all of these. I want to say thank you again to our C+V team. You're terrific. To IT for doing all of this great work. To our captioner, thank you so much. And then one last thing. There is a program we have called You Rock, and you can go on and send people all kinds of good messages, and You Rocks. And so find that on the DU website, on the C+V website, and send someone a you rock, because I think we all need a little bit of that these days.